Okay, ladies and gentlemen, an interesting thought from Stephen Wolfram, who wrote a book called The New Kind of Science, published in, I think, 2004 or 2005. And the thesis of that, real quick, I've got a video on it, so you can go watch that if you like. But the thesis of A New Kind of Science is that basic small sets of rules, just a few regular rules, can lead to complexity after many steps that cannot be predicted from the rules. You actually have to run the rules through. This is different from anything, you know, we all think of things as calculatable, but his point is that some of them aren't calculatable. Basic rules can actually have massive amounts of random stuff you could never have seen to come from the rules until you ran the rules out. If that doesn't shock you, go listen to some of his stuff and see if you can get your head wrapped around it a little better. But anyways, his point about the history of the universe, as per scientists today trying to figure out the Big Bang and stuff, his point about the history of the universe is that it may be hidden in random evolution. We may not be able to construct all of the steps back to the very first second of the Big Bang. I know they say they've already gotten to a tenth of a millionth of a second before the Big Bang, you know, with particle accelerators and stuff. But his point would be that where we are today is not necessarily a step of obvious cause and effect back to the beginning. There may be patches in there of randomness that could not be known from the rules starting out or the rules that we've ended up with. So that, like, well, let's look at evolution. You can get the fossils and bones that have been deposited every once in a while randomly through history, and we can sort of fill in the gaps, you know, with our mind and our theories, and then every once in a while we find fossils that fit into the gaps. And that's all fine, but if you were to try to take something from, say, 200 million years ago, which was what, like, 2 billion years ago, I mean to say, which is what, like trilobites maybe, I think, and stuff like that is the biggest life of the time, maybe even less than that. Maybe it's still microbial back then. In fact, I think it might have been until 1.7 billion years ago, maybe. But go back to when you can get some basic little animals and trilobites. Take those and come and put them next to a human, and see how much you can come up with of the connecting lines in between. And it's just, if you look at it that way, it's obvious that you do have to fill in those parts in between with something. You cannot just say, you cannot deduce from what a human is backwards through all of evolution, because evolution is not, for all intents and purposes, it is not necessarily cause and effect. It does have some element of randomness in it. I'll just put that to bed real quick with one example. Imagine an animal that was born with an extremely good immune system or something, better than all the other animals around it, but it happened to get crushed by a falling rock before it ever was able to reproduce. And so the gene pool had to go on without that animal's genes. So the more perfect or better version of the animal is therefore not available to the gene pool in a weird case. So even on a basic level like that, you have to say randomness is involved in evolution, and randomness almost certainly was involved in the evolution of the universe, whatever it's evolved from. And there's those who take slight exception to the Big Bang theory, and there's evidence against the Big Bang theory. So, and I don't know where I come in on that, because the Big Bang theory is so well explained and coherent. I do have a little scruffle with it, in that it was posited first by Edgar Allan Poe, so you can't necessarily say that it started out as a scientific theory the way that, say, Empedocles posited evolution as a scientific theory at first, or that gravity was put as a scientific theory by Newton, or that Copernicus or Aristarchus of Samos put the sun as holding still. That was a scientific theory. But to say I think that all of the universe came out of one point in space and time was not scientific. It was done by Edgar Allan Poe. And if it is true then it's not necessarily going to be the case that we can understand every step in between. The past may be hidden in random evolution. This isn't saying that there's a limit to our mind, except we can't understand or calculate the random. So it's not saying there's a limit to our mind to understand history. It's saying that that history simply is lost to investigation in certain senses. There are parts of the universe that are so far away the light's still getting to us, and they look as they would have 8 billion years ago if we were there, but we can't travel to them and do anything with them, because by the time they got there, you see, that'd be a mess. Well, take that home with you then. The past might be hidden in random evolution, and maybe the only thing that we'll ever be able to do to get into the past and see what exactly happened there is things like the fossils that tell us what happened as far as evolution is concerned. You know, things like everyone thought it's progression from fish to land animals to monkeys or something, tree animals or something like that. And then they find that there were these land animals that crawled back in the water. They're called whales today. And at one time in the past, 200 million years ago or so, they were these large land wolves things. So, take that home with you. Don't expect the Big Bang to be so well explained anytime soon, or don't expect that we could deduce evolution from a single fossil. It's obvious.